Let's bring in Caitlin Huey-Burns and Eugene Scott. Caitlin is with Real Clear Politics and a CBSN political contributor, and Eugene is with the Washington Post. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having us.
Eugene, Kelly's frustrations have been sort of simmering, or at least reported on for some time. Why was it important for him to come out now and sort of debunk this idea that he might be walking out of the White House?
Because I think after we heard so much criticism from Bob Corker, and then we had the situation where Rex Tillerson supposedly called the president a moron, it was just a bit of a sieve in terms of a lack of support in the White House. And I think he wanted to reiterate to the American people, as well as Trump, which is the most important voice, I think, in this conversation, that he was on its team.
Well, and you say that, it's interesting, Caitlin. You know, Kelly's been described as a moderating influence on President Trump, but he sounded pretty Trump-like when he aimed his criticism at the media today. Was that a little hat tip to the president? Was that for his benefit, do you think?
Sure. He knows his audience, and he knows that the president watches these briefings, or would especially be watching this one, since it was the first time that Kelly came out. Eugene makes a great point that this is definitely something to calm tensions, and you also have to think about it in the context of what they're up against here, right? They are about to announce tomorrow that they're not going to certify the Iran deal. They're facing the issues with North Korea, of course. They're also facing recovery efforts in Houston and Florida and Puerto Rico, very much under fire for that. So within the White House, there's some of this, and outside of it, they're facing a lot of challenges that kind of reverberate around the world.
You mentioned the Iran deal. The president is going to announce his intentions for the Iran deal on Friday. Our State Department reporter, Kylie Atwood, filed a report.
On Friday, President Trump is expected to decertify the Iran deal. So essentially what that means is he's punting it over to Congress. He's not going to tear up the deal as he had promised to do on the campaign trail, but essentially he is going to ferment what the U.S. policy is towards Iran in terms of dealing with the totality of their bad action in the region, but leave the deal intact for now. What this does is it gives Congress 60 days to come up to a plan with how to go forward. And they could potentially add more sanctions on Iran, but they could also give the U.S. some more leverage at the negotiating table. The administration would like to see changes to certain parts of this deal as it stands. So, for example, they'd like to see there be inspections of military sites. They'd also like there to be the possibility that there's a decision made about how to go forward with the deal after it expires in 10 years. But other countries who are also party to this deal are not thrilled about this way forward. They say that it could potentially blow up the deal in full. And they're worried that this is going to lead to a domino effect, right? That the U.S. is going to become harsher on Iran. Iran might then say that they are going to get out of the deal because the U.S. is violating the deal. And then the deal is completely blown up, and there's no way to see what Iran is doing. Secretary Tillerson spent his day on the phone, his spokesperson said, and he was making calls to foreign leaders to try and listen to them about what they think is the best way forward. And though he didn't say that he told them exactly what the president is going to do on Friday regarding the Iran deal, he was in listening mode, trying to understand where potentially they would be willing to move forward in trying to enforce this deal as it stands a little bit more.
That was Kylie Atwood, our State Department reporter. Eugene, the president, we played a bite earlier of him saying he'd rip up this deal, promising our heads would spin. He'd rip it up so fast. I don't think there's going to be a head spinning tomorrow, right? What does it mean if he just simply decertifies this deal, and what does it mean for Congress?
Well, I think it's the latest example that we've seen coming from this White House that shows it's a lot easier to campaign on certain promises than to make that actually happen once you get in the White House. Despite what the president said on the trail, there are multiple top security advisors and international affairs advisors in the White House who actually don't support completely ripping up the deal. And as the reporter alluded to in terms of like international diplomats, a lot of allies in Europe don't support this either. So I think what's happening is that the State Department and people on the president's foreign affairs community or team are having to figure out what is the best way to move forward that doesn't cause as much harm as possible, but that also stays true to his campaign promises without making him look like a hypocrite.
Right. I want to ask Caitlin about that. So, right, is the president setting himself up to sort of say, well, you know, I did what I can do on ripping up the deal, or at least decertifying it. Now it's up to Congress. Is he setting Congress up, do you think, like as a foil, sort of like he did a little bit with the Obamacare repeal?
Could be, with Obamacare repeal, with DACA, kind of kicking it back to Congress. Interestingly enough, Congress, as much as you hear detractors of the deal, especially Republicans criticizing this deal, they're not sure that withdrawing from it completely is the right thing to do. You had Chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee in the House, Ed Royce, saying, I don't like this deal either, but it's here, it's been implemented, we've got to enforce the hell out of it, is essentially what he said. And so Congress is going to have to tackle this issue, and the president gets to say, kind of have it both ways here.
So politically, though, moving forward, I mean, how do Republicans feel about this, where the president just sort of says, okay, it's your problem, and we know you're not going to be able to solve it, so you got to deal with it now. It's off my plate. Right.
More broadly, Congress is taking the blame for everything.
Right.
And as you both know, when you look at the polling, especially among Republicans, they are blaming Congress, not President Trump. And he very much knows that, which is also why we saw him kind of take the action that he did on health care.
I mean, it's a bit of throwing under the bus, right, Eugene? And at what point is there a breaking point for Republicans in Congress, do you think? Or do they think because, at least my sense is, these folks who are running for re-election next year do need Trump voters to come out and vote for them. Do you think they just sort of grin and bear it and watch their numbers sink while the president tries to save himself?
Well, to hear Bob Corker tell it, yes, right? They are frustrated and talking about this vocally.
Well, Bob Corker can talk about this because he's not running for re-election next year, right?
He's in a safe place that many of these other Republican lawmakers are not, because they need Trump supporters. And as Caitlin mentioned, Trump's base is still on board the Trump train. And so regardless of him not completely fulfilling the promises that he said he would, they still are supporting him, because he can always blame the swamp and the Washington establishment, which he will never be seen as a part of, to his base.
So the president signed an executive order today on health care. He described it as the beginning of a process, of the process to repeal and replace. What exactly did he sign?
Well, he signed an arrangement that will allow individuals and associations to perhaps come together and figure out healthcare options for themselves that give them a bit more flexibility than what is currently available with the Affordable Care Act. There's some frustration, not just with the Democrats, obviously, but also Republicans about what this will actually do to the market as a whole, because it could hurt some people, many people, quite frankly, who may be more sick, who may be older, by allowing people to opt out of the healthcare system set up as is, in a way that can make healthcare more affordable for the people that Trump promised it would be more affordable for.
Right. And do you know of any reaction from insurance industry, politically in general? What does this mean moving forward, Caitlin?
Right. Well, this has been kind of a conservative principle, right, which is pretty ironic, though, when you think about how many years Republicans spent railing against President Obama's executive orders on things, when he would say, look, Congress isn't taking care of this, I'm going to move forward. We saw that on DACA, deferred action for children of undocumented immigrants. What's interesting about this, though, is that, I mean, to Eugene's point, it could further, it's kind of designed to further unravel Obamacare in a lot of ways. And the president has said that he wants to, in many ways, undermine the law, that it's falling apart, that he doesn't really want to, support it, that something needs to be done. I think what's interesting about doing this through executive order, though, is you heard from his campaign and supporters say, look, the president is acting when Congress didn't. And you talk to Republican lawmakers, and I know you both have, they say you cannot underestimate how angry the Republican base is that we haven't been able to get anything done. And so just going back to our earlier conversation, this gives the president a chance to say, well, I'm taking care of it.
I just want to switch gears real quickly, 1 second. On Friday, Maine Senator Susan Collins, moderate Republican, is going to announce whether she's going to run for governor of Maine or run for election to her Senate seat. What is at stake for Republicans in the Senate if she decides to bolt from Washington?
Well, as we know, Senator Collins is among the most moderate Republicans in Congress, has been kind of the mold of not being afraid to criticize the president, not being afraid to vote against much of her party's interests. We saw that on the healthcare law, for example. I think it would signal, if she were to run for governor, that there are others like her kind of feeling that position. We saw Bob Corker, as you mentioned earlier. If she stays, I think that's telling as well. Maybe she figures she has more to do and more of a voice because she has gotten a lot of attention.
A lot of people holding their breaths in Maine and on Capitol Hill.
Absolutely.
Caitlin Huey-Burns from Real Clear Politics, Eugene Scott from the Washington Post. Thank you.
Thank you.